Welcome to another episode of Costume Cinematographico, an in-depth analysis from some of my favorite television shows and movies. In this Part 1 episode, I will focus on the principal costumes of Star Wars 1977, otherwise known as A New Hope. This analysis will be from a costume design perspective, looking at the inspirations behind the film and less from a construction point of view. For the enormous undertaking of analyzing just the first tale in the original trilogy, I have turned to Andrew McCarthy, better known online as ATMachine. Over the years, Andrew has pored over encyclopedia-sized works and has learned what I couldn't possibly discover in just a few months. Andrew has kindly shared with me his research, co-writing the following two-part presentation with me, and in case you have been living under a rock, spoiler warning for the entire movie. Star Wars is a 1977 American epic space opera film written and directed by George Lucas, and it stars Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, and Carrie Fisher. Star Wars was inspired by the pulps of the 1930s, such as Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers, the samurai films of Japanese director Akira Kurosawa, most notably The Hidden Fortress, science fiction novels like Frank Herbert's Dune, and the works of American sci-fi and fantasy novelist Edgar Rice Burroughs. Many luminaries have accused Lucas of taking their ideas. Even French comic book artist and concept artist behind the space opera The Fifth Element, Jean-Claude Mézières, accused the Star Wars creators of lifting concepts from his Valerian book series. However, perhaps the best rebuttal was provided by screenwriter Dan O'Bannon, seen on the left with H.R. Giger, who said of his script for Alien, "I didn't steal it from anybody, I stole it from everybody." The original costume budget for the film was about $300,000, equivalent to about $1.2 million today. To put that into perspective, the costume budget for Rogue One was $21 million, almost 10 times the budget for the original Star Wars. Part of the reason why breaking down the costumes for a 40-year-old movie such as Star Wars is such a huge undertaking is that those that tell the story are not the best narrators of their own tale. Lucas, of course, being the most unreliable narrator of them all. Of course, we can give him some slack that over time he has forgotten many of the details, but at other times it feels like he is downright deceptive. Over the years, fans have caught him in several fabrications, from whether he initially intended Luke and Leia to be brother and sister, probably not, at least in the 1977 film, or whether he knew that Vader was Luke's father, Anakin Skywalker. He definitely did not. We even have to take the words spoken by the cast and crew with a grain of salt and perhaps make up our own minds based upon what we do know. So we will do our best to tell you what we do know. While writing the second draft of the Star Wars script, Lucas commissioned American concept designer and illustrator Ralph McQuarrie, seen here on the left with a young George Lucas, to create several illustrations and paintings depicting the characters and scenes described by Lucas. Of the process, the late McQuarrie said, "I just did my best to depict what I thought the film should look like, and I really liked the idea. I didn't think the film would ever get made. My impression was it was too expensive. There wouldn't be enough of an audience. It's just too complicated. But George knew a lot of things that I didn't know." Lucas submitted his treatment along with several of McQuarrie's sketches and got a green light from the studio to proceed with the project, thanks in large part to McQuarrie's gorgeous visions of the Star Wars universe. McQuarrie found himself painting additional concept paintings for Star Wars, as well as helping with matte paintings during production. Like Lucas, McQuarrie was evidently familiar with a wide range of pulp works from the early 20th century. His Star Wars concept art frequently draws inspiration from Alex Raymond's Flash Gordon comics and Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoom novels. As well as other stuff that proved much less enduring, McQuarrie referred to Luke and Leia's Death Star chasm swing as the Lash Verlou scene, a reference to 1940s star of Hollywood westerns who is today nearly forgotten. Ralph McQuarrie says of his process, "I'd sit with a pencil and dream about whatever I could imagine, sort of grotesque imagery. George would come by every week and a half, or 2 weeks, look at what I'd done and talk to me about what he'd like to see. I was reading the script to start with, but the script sort of got waylaid. The story was changing in his own mind, so George would just come and talk to me about what he wanted to see." McQuarrie would go on to create concept art for the other 2 pictures in the original trilogy, along with other science fiction projects like Close Encounters of the Third Kind and the original Battlestar Galactica television series. While the initial design concepts were created by Lucas and McQuarrie, costumes were further developed and realized by British costume designer and book author John Mollo. Pictured on the left, Mollo is a 2-time Academy Award winner, best known for his Oscar-winning costume design for the original Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. Mollo was interested in European and American military uniforms as a boy and wrote several books on the subject. This led him to design costumes, first as an advisor for the movie Charge of the Light Brigade in 1966, and later as an official costume designer. Oh, and he designed the costumes for Alien. Of his first design job for Star Wars, Mollo says, "I had just finished working as an historical military advisor on Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon when Milena Canonero asked whether I was interested in working on a yet untitled new science fiction film. Since I had just finished the work for Kubrick, I thought I'd investigate further and met George Lucas over the Christmas of 1975. We discussed a few concepts when I joined the team, and George had a clear vision of what he was looking for. He liked the idea of the baddies having fascist look about them, with the heroes reflecting the look of heroes of the American Wild West." An example of Mollo's art style can be seen in this early concept for Darth Vader. It also shows how Mollo's drawings frequently featured ideas not seen in the costumes on screen. Note how Vader's armor is styled like a medieval suit of plate armor, while his lightsaber handle is shaped like the hilt of a broadsword. Mollo also drew an imperial symbol of Vader's cloak and helmet, and sketched designs for Vader's cloak clasp in the lower right corner. The imperial symbol proposed here is an arrowhead, like the arrowhead used by the Enterprise crew on Star Trek, which fits with Lucas' idea of the Empire having begun as a corruption of the Old Republic. Brian Ellinger, author of the Star Wars Original Trilogy Costumes book, includes in it a few excerpts from his interviews with John Mollo. Mollo says that, at Lucas's suggestion, his costumes were designed to be color-coded so that the good guys wore organic colors and earth tones, while the bad guys wore technological colors in black and gray. There are exceptions to the association of evil with technology, however. Mollo notes that while Luke's Star Wars 1977 outfit is actually a light tan, Leia's dress is stark white, marking her as part of the technological world as well. The color scheme basically has the baddies would be black or gray, with the exception of the stormtroopers, and the goodies should be in earth colors, fawns and whites, Mollo said. Here are Ralph McQuarrie's earliest designs for Luke's costume, from around the time of the second draft. As with all of McQuarrie's early costume designs, this one is form-fitting and covered in electronic equipment, an aesthetic that draws heavily from Alex Raymond's work on Flash Gordon. McQuarrie proposed a prop-laden outfit for Luke that went unused. Here's a drawing by Mollo which shows it off. It depicts Luke Starkiller from the January 1975 second draft, already junked before Mollo was hired. Luke is wearing the vest and head goggles seen in a 1975 McQuarrie painting of Luke in the Mos Eisley Cantina. Mollo also took his cue from McQuarrie's painting in giving Luke short hair, a detail vanished later in sketches from the third draft. Here's the Ralph McQuarrie painting where Mollo got the costume idea. Completed in March of 1975, it's an early concept of Luke and the 2 droids at the Mos Eisley Cantina. It predates Lucas's summer 1975 brief flirtation with turning Luke into a girl between the second and third drafts, after which point McQuarrie drew Luke with a bowl-cut hairstyle. Here are a few thumbnail sketches from the same McQuarrie painting. Luke's white costume originally included a long desert cloak like Ben Kenobi's. In this drawing, Luke's desert cloak appears in the lower right corner. Malo's handwritten note suggests it should have a technological clasp. As with the rest of Luke's clothing, the hooded cloak is white in color. If you look closely at Malo's drawing, the cloak's hood has a tassel at its endpoint, a detail Malo also used in the sketches of Ben Kenobi's brown cloak. The cloak is white probably so it should be spattered with Leia's blood after she was tortured by Darth Vader, as in Lawrence of Arabia. While writing the third draft, Lucas intended Leia's clothing to be damaged during her torture in prison. After the hero's escape, she would likely have used Luke's white cloak to cover herself once they got back to the Millennium Falcon. In any case, the white cloak didn't make it to the final film. Instead, Luke sports a brown poncho, clearly inspired by Clint Eastwood's attire in Sergio Leone's Dollars Trilogy. Luke's poncho, however, is much less flattering than Eastwood's serape, befitting his status as an inexperienced youth who has yet to fully become a hero. The poncho itself is hardly seen in the film. Its most notable appearance is when Leia puts it over Luke's shoulders after Obi-Wan's death, a plot point that was only added while the film was being shot. However, the poncho was used in several alternate takes from the first film that ended up on the cutting room floor. The look of the cape is also a close resemblance to the Greek chlamys, a short cape worn by young men in ancient Greece. Here is a John Malo drawing of Luke with Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen Lars. Malo's designs for Tatooine natives were intended to convey a Saxon quality. It portrays Luke as a humble peasant farmer, like the medieval English peasantry in the legends of Robin Hood and Ivanhoe. Those stories depict the down-to-earth Saxons as being oppressed by the ruling Normans, who are typically presented as an alien French elite. The Saxon-Norman rivalry of England legend provides a neat parallel with the Rebel Empire conflict of the Star Wars galaxy. As typically depicted in films and illustrations, the costumes of Saxon English peasants are quite similar to Luke's farm boy outfit, a long-sleeved tunic and a close-fitting trousers often combined with stockings or puttees. Besides the influence of Japanese costume, where knee-length socks are often worn by warriors, the leg windings or winningas also suggest the clothing of the Saxon peasantry in Dark Age England, where, at least in popular imagination, the Normans ruled with an iron fist. Khaki-colored wool puttees were widely worn with ankle boots by British Empire soldiers during the First World War. The idea was to keep the mud from the trenches from soaking into the soldiers' boots. It didn't work very well and actually contributed to trench foot. Because of George Lucas's suggestion, Luke's shirt is Japanese in style instead of Western. When McQuarrie and Malo settled on an all-white outfit seen in the final film, they changed Luke's hairstyle from a short conservative haircut to a longer bowl cut, rather like the ubiquitous Russian peasant hairstyle in Sergei Eisenstein's 1938 historical drama film Alexander Nevsky. This is reflected in the description of Luke in the March 1976 revised fourth draft, by which point Mark Hamill had been cast, which mentions Luke's shaggy hair. As mentioned earlier, between writing the second and third drafts of Star Wars in the summer of 1975, George Lucas briefly considered giving his film a female protagonist. Several of Ralph McQuarrie's designs from that period incorporate this idea of a female Luke Starkiller. Here's a McQuarrie layout for his painting of the female Luke overlooking Mos Eisley. In the final painting, he chose to use a different viewpoint, so we see Femme Luke from far off, standing on a high bluff next to her land speeder. Of having a female Luke, Lucas said, "The original treatment was about a princess and an old man, and then I wrote her out for a while, and the second draft didn't really have any girls in it at all. I was very disturbed about that. I didn't want to make a movie without any women in it, so I struggled with that, and at one point Luke was a girl. I just changed the main character from a guy to a girl." McQuarrie also produced a detailed drawing of the outfit he designed for the female Luke. The notes on the page indicate that the base garment is a silver mesh body stocking overlaid with a brown leather vest. These extremely form-fitting costumes largely went by the wayside around the time of the third draft. Here are some more sketches of the female Luke by Star Wars storyboard artist Alex Tavoularis. Like his later drawings of Princess Leia from the third draft, Tavoularis' femme Luke has dark hair. However, Ralph McQuarrie's drawings show the same character as a blonde. Tavoularis' handwritten caption confirms that the female Luke never had a name of her own. The name Alderaan refers here to a prison planet that was merged with the Death Star in later drafts. It was a Bespins-type world with a floating cloud city high in the atmosphere. Luke's breathing mask was likely due to the thin air at this altitude. This Ralph McQuarrie face sketch of the female Luke shows how his designs contrast with Tavoularis' interpretation. Here's a McQuarrie drawing of Luke with brown hair, making him look like Buck Rogers, done in June 1975, just as Lucas decided to keep Luke male. Here's another McQuarrie image that shows Luke with brown hair, his version of the Lash LaRue swing over the Death Star chasm, added to the script between the third and fourth drafts. Leia's still blonde though, like Wilma Deering, Buck Rogers' girlfriend. At this stage, McQuarrie seems to have considered making Luke and Leia appear nearly identical, just with slightly different shades of hair. One would have blonde hair and the other light brown. Luke has the brown hair in McQuarrie's Death Star chasm swing painting, while Leia has it in this McQuarrie black and white sketch seen here of their costumes side by side. Mark Hamill himself said once that the pants were just bleached Levi's with the tags still on them. In the image on the right, you can see the label from the original costume house in London, Berman's and Nathan's. The cotton drill Levi's would later be auctioned off for tens of thousands of dollars, while Luke's entire Tatooine costume, of which there were only two, cost about $750 in the 70s. With inflation, that would be about $3,000 today. The Rebels' orange flight suits are based on vintage U.S. Air Force orange flight suits from the Vietnam era, as well as the orange jumpsuits worn by Apollo and Skylab crew members under their spacesuits. I confirmed that the orange Rebel flight suits base layer were made by J Brand Racewear, who are now known as J's Racewear. Among the items added to their space were pistol flares around the knee reminiscent of those worn by the Luftwaffe, the aerial warfare branch of the German Army forces during World War II, and webbing that originally belonged to parachute rigs. The flight helmet was based on an experimental helmet the military didn't use. It's likely that Luke's helmet is meant to be borrowed from another crew member, with each V marking indicating a victory in battle. Here is Luke's Yavin ceremonial costume at the end of Star Wars. His outfit consists of fitted brown denim pants tucked into black leather, knee-high military boots, a black leather belt with a leg holster, a black double-breasted shirt, and a yellow motorcycle-style jacket. Luke's jacket was another instance where Lucas shot an alternate take, in this case of the medal ceremony with Luke not wearing the coat. According to ScienceFictionArchives.com, the Star Wars production team used a famous racing-style jacket that can be spotted on other characters in other colors in the movie. The same brand of racing-style jackets was also used for sci-fi TV series Space 1999 as Moonbase Alpha jackets. A little-known fact about this jacket is that similar jackets were used by both Ponda Baba, the Walrus Man, and Greedo in the Mos Eisley Cantina scene. The Ponda Baba costume uses an orange version of his jacket, while Greedo's jumpsuit is made from a version of this jacket with a modified collar and the zipper removed from the front. In this photo of Greedo, you see similar ribbing on the sleeves. The ribbed sleeve style has since become a hallmark of the production design used in the Disney Star Wars films, like in this image of Finn wearing Poe Dameron's leather jacket with ribbed sleeves from The Force Awakens. Here's a pretty good look at Luke's outfit without the jacket. The style of his pants and boots are nearly identical to Han's, except for, of course, the pants are brown with a yellow military stripe, referred to in Star Wars legends as second-class Carillion blood stripes. It is doubtful that Malo had determined what this meant for the original trilogy, and therefore I believe it might just be a design detail. The overlapping shirt looks similar to a vintage Western shirt except with the typical bib front, or plastron, although it would later show up on Luke's shirt in Return of the Jedi. Here are some very early concept designs for Leia that have a Flash Gordon feel to them. The sketch at the left, presumably by storyboard artist Alex Touvallaris, is featured in the book The Cinema of George Lucas. This early sketch of Princess Leia by Alex Touvallaris, found in the making of Star Wars, is unfinished, but she's evidently wearing no more than a bikini bottom or loincloth. This, along with John Mallo's costume notes, which suggest a Tarzan-style outfit for Leia, indicate that Lucas considered having Leia be topless during the prison escape, an idea he'd also planned for the third act of the 1974 rough draft. Lucas later rejected the idea once he decided that Star Wars ought to be an all-ages family film and thus maximizing its profits. In Touvallaris' storyboards for the opening scenes of the third draft script, Leia is wearing the demure hooded white dress envisioned by Lucas and McQuarrie. Unlike McQuarrie and Mallo, who depicted her with blonde or light brown hair, Touvallaris drew Leia with dark hair to echo Dale Arden from Alex Raymond's Flash Gordon Sunday comics. Around the time of the third draft script, it appears Lucas wanted Luke and Leia to be physically nearly identical, with slightly different shades of blonde hair. Not because they were literally twinsies yet, though. Rather, Lucas may have wanted their physical resemblance to suggest the concept of the Jungian anima animus, the female side buried within a man's consciousness and vice versa. This other half of one's personality must be accepted in order to become a well-adjusted individual. Luke and Leia's great resemblance would indicate that they are the missing half of each other's personality and thus soulmates destined to be romantically linked. It is possible, though, that having Leia be Luke's sister was something Lucas was already considering even then. In fact, Leia's role in the 1975 third draft replaced the character of Luke's older brother in the second draft. Lucas took a lot of inspiration at the time from Norse mythology, and especially the operas of Richard Wagner, whose Ring Cycle features a hero born as a result of sibling incest. So not only was the Luke-Leia sibling plot considered, if it had been used, it would have made the incest much more explicit, Game of Thrones style. In 1975, Luke and Leia wouldn't have been exact twins. The script says that Luke is 20 years old and Leia is 16, but they might have still been half-siblings. In Wagner's Ring Cycle operas, the half-siblings Sigmund and Sieglinde fall in love and have incestuous sex, resulting in the birth of the hero Siegfried. Here are two 1910 illustrations of Sigmund and Sieglinde by English book illustrator Arthur Rackman. Note how Sigmund and Sieglinde both have blonde hair, like McQuarrie's drawings of Luke and Leia. However, the sibling idea fell by the wayside by the time Star Wars was released in 1977, probably because Lucas considered incest too risque a topic for the first Star Wars film. As the saying goes, it might not play in Peoria. And while making Empire Strikes Back, Lucas definitely planned for Leia and Luke's sister to be separate characters. In other concept art from the third draft period, Leia has black hair. Dale Arden in Alex Raymond's Flash Gordon comic strip had black hair, and Lucas also considered having Leia resemble the Japanese princess Yuki from Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress by casting her with a Japanese or part Japanese actress, just as he hoped to get Toshiro Mifune to play Ben Kenobi. As mentioned earlier, John Mallo at one point proposed a Tarzan-type outfit for Leia. The most distinctive element of Tarzan's costume is his loincloth. Since the 1974 Star Wars rough draft script implies that Princess Leia is running around topless during the third act, when John Mallo suggested a Tarzan-like outfit, he meant exactly that. During the prison escape, Leia would be wearing just a loincloth like the heroines in the pulp science fiction novels of Edgar Rice Burroughs and Lee Brackett. It was fairly standard in a Flash Gordon-style space opera to put the heroine in a revealing outfit, often with a silken loincloth and jeweled breastplates. So, it's also possible Malo considered having Princess Leia's standard outfit be essentially the slave Leia costume just 2 movies early. But Lucas didn't want his princess to wear something so risque for her normal outfit. He wanted Leia's style of dress to be fairly conservative, to contrast with the clothing damage after her time in prison. It's a classic Freudian Madonna whore dichotomy. Lucas also shot down Malo's idea of giving Leia's white dress a low neckline, so instead, Carrie Fisher ended up with a turtleneck collar. Leia's normal attire, as Malo describes it, was a mock medieval dress, styled after the robes of the Virgin Mary in Catholic iconography. The medieval aspect definitely carried over into Leia's costume in the final film. This is also true of her hair buns, which come from medieval hairstyles by way of Queen Freya in Flash Gordon, seen here on the left as portrayed by German-American actor Luli Deste. This is one of the very few sketches by McQuarrie from Star Wars 1977, where he depicts Princess Leia with dark hair. In virtually all of his drawings from the first film, Leia is a blonde, indicating that she's Luke's soulmate and missing female half, and possibly even his half-sister. The absence of that symbolism here suggests this sketch was made particularly early in the genesis of the third draft. McQuarrie's drawing of Leia and the Imperial torture robot also incorporates another obscure Pulp Fiction reference. Early 20th century illustrations and films of Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan often gave the Lord of Apes a garment with over-the-shoulder strap. McQuarrie echoes that here by showing Leia's garment falling off one shoulder, exposing one of her breasts. Here is a picture of James Pierce in costume as Tarzan from the 1927 film Tarzan and the Golden Lion. Pierce, who was actually Edgar Rice Burroughs' son-in-law, is wearing an over-the-shoulder garment frequently seen on depictions of Tarzan from before World War II. Some more miscellaneous costume sketches by Ralph McQuarrie left a very practical version of Princess Leia's costume with a hip-length blouse and pants, not to mention a holstered blaster. And on the right is Ralph McQuarrie's original concept for the Peter Pan leotard, as Carrie Fisher described it, a design which ultimately went to the Tonica sisters in the Mos Eisley Cantina scene instead of Leia. A handwritten note by Lucas on this drawing labels it as Leia After Prison, indicating Lucas has considered it as a family-friendly alternative to Leia's clothing damage after her torture by Vader. Here's a drawing of Leia's white costume by Malo. In addition to the main drawing of the princess, with 2 possible necklines, one a turtleneck and another with a much lower cut, there are 2 different versions of her costume at either side. The costume at left is Malo's version of McQuarrie's leotard design for Leia's costume, which used a form-fitting bodysuit adorned with small metal greeblies. And the rightmost sketch, Malo has upped the sexiness factor. Leia's whole shirt is made of transparent pleated fabric. It also has a bare midriff and a flared Ming the Merciless collar at the neck, just for good measure. Lucas was determined that Leia's normal outfit would be conservative, however, so that idea never made it off the drawing pad. Malo's sketches here show Leia wearing a transparent shirt under her white cloak. The idea was that Leia would lose her cloak during her time in Vader's prison. Notice that Leia's center belt buckle, like Han's, is in the shape of a hexagon. The final belt contained an upside-down pentagon to fit into the downward point of the belt. I'm not sure if it was intentional, but the shape represents the 4 classical Greek elements of fire, earth, air, and water, plus the 5th element of ether, or spirit, a perfect symbol for Leia's character. In this drawing, Malo has again drawn Leia's outfit as a 2-layer ensemble. The outer layer is a full-length robe to which her hood is attached, and the inner layer features a turtleneck shirt with wide billowing sleeves. Malo's pen strokes of this drawing indicate the sleeves of Leia's shirt are transparent and made of some sheer pleated fabric. In this version, only the sleeves are transparent, unlike the earlier sketches where the entire shirt is made of that sheer material. The tabs or tabard that follow the neckline on the outer layer are influenced by Japanese robes in the same way that the Jedi costumes were. A less revealing but equally pulpy concept for Leia's wardrobe is visible as a light sketch of this other Malo drawing. Between the two full-figure drawings of Leia, again with transparent sleeves, Malo has sketched the outline of a low-cut dress with metal breastplates riveted on. The result would be rather like the woman's outfit seen on this vintage Planet Stories cover. Some additional sketches by John Malo for Leia's white dress from the 1978 book The Art of Star Wars. The design seen at lower left continues the motif of pleated transparent sleeves and a Saxon-style collar. The drawing in the middle extends the sheer fabric to the torso, creating a triangular, transparent midriff panel. And the rightmost design is a V-neck variant on the outer robe of Leia's two-layer costume, seen in other Malo sketches. The robe resembles a Japanese kimono. While McQuarrie didn't draw Leia's gown with transparent areas, he did make plans for what would be seen under it. In this drawing, McQuarrie has sketched in a beaded nipple chain hanging from Leia's breasts, inspired by a line said by Katharine Hepburn in the 1968 film The Lion in Winter, about the medieval English King Henry II and his wife Eleanor of Aquitaine. The nipple chain is the sort of flourish that would not be out of place in an Edgar Rice Burroughs or Lee Brackett novel. McQuarrie also drew a bare-breasted Leia in this sketch for his painting of the Death Star Chasm Swing. Notice how Leia holds her blaster in her left hand and covers her exposed chest with her right arm. Another McQuarrie sketch of the Chasm Swing scene shows a bare-breasted Leia who isn't quite as modest. Here she's wearing a necklace with a large jewel visible. In an interview in The Making of Star Wars, John Malo says that Jean Harlow, the platinum blonde sex symbol of the 1930s Hollywood, was his biggest inspiration for Leia's look. This may explain why Malo's drawings of Leia feature such racy designs and transparent fabrics. At Lucas's request, Leia's white dress went in a much more conservative and European direction, mock medieval, as Malo noted. It was quite deliberately modeled on a nun's habit. Like many of the costumes that were constructed and rented, Malo had the gown made at a London costume shop, Berman's and Nathan's, acquired by Angel's Costumers in 1992, and had an outside prop maker fabricate the belt with the silver buckles on it. Malo's handwritten notes for Leia's costume on one sketch indicate that he hadn't yet decided what type of footwear to give her. Sandals, shoes, boots. Pretty much all of his drawings opt for tall boots, however. Lucas infamously told Carrie Fisher that space princesses don't wear bras. This may be more than an instance of perving on George's part. It presumably came about because he'd actually considered showing Leia in only her undergarments. My own thoughts on the fabric of Leia's dress were that it was some form of jersey, but not silk, because that would snag and pull too easily. It was a poster on a forum who tipped me off that the fabric might be Kiana, a silky nylon knit fiber developed in 1962 by DuPont. A popular fabric in the 70s, Kiana is described as a polyamide fabric having improved resilience and silk-like hand combined with superior wash performance. On the left is a Kiana jersey fabric red cape and skirt, designed in 1971 by American couture designer Charles Kleibacher. And on the right is a white Kleibacher Kiana gown from a display at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York from 1969. Nicknamed Master of the Bias, Kleibacher was solicited by DuPont to develop dress designs in the late 1960s with their new fiber. Even after the casting of Carrie Fisher as Leia, it appears the makeup department on Star Wars 1977 kept in mind Lucas's desire to have a blonde princess. In this picture, Fisher is in a makeup test wearing a dark blonde wig that was quickly rejected. Shades of Lena Headey of Game of Thrones or the initial filming of the 1939 Wizard of Oz, which slapped a blonde wig on Judy Garland. In the third draft and beyond, Leia's appearance is never described in the script. The concept art shows her with several different looks, short hair and long, blonde hair and black, What none of the concept art shows is the famous cinnamon bun hairstyle, which was quite obviously derived from the character of Queen Freya in Alex Raymond's 30s Flash Gordon strip. Raymond gave Freya this hair because it was a stock medieval hairstyle in fantasy illustrations. For instance, American illustrator and author Howard Pyle gave Morgan Le Fay the exact same hairdo in his illustrated books about King Arthur from the turn of the 20th century. Here is a similar version on French actress Sophie Marceau from Braveheart as Princess Isabella of France. Compare two historical representations of Princess Isabella of France. The statue on the right clearly has the plaited coils. It's possible that Alex Raymond based Freya's hairstyle in part on the earphone or cootie garage hairstyles of the 20s. This style for young women, usually high school girls, involved winding plaits up by the ears. The nickname earphones comes from the style of earphones people used to listen to broadcasts on crystal radio sets. The alternative, cootie garages, alludes to the hairbraid's ability to hide lice and other stuff and the large bun of hair at the side of a woman's head. Meanwhile, Leia Akila's hairstyle in the 1974 rough draft seems to have featured two long braids of red hair worn hanging down in front of her ears like the heroine Kriemhild's hairstyle in Austrian director Fritz Lang's 1924 film Die Nibelungen. Lang's film was an adaptation of the dramatic legend of the hero Siegfried, the same story used by Richard Wagner on the basis for his Ring cycle. As a side note, the costume designer for Die Nibelungen was Annie Wilcom, who worked with Fritz Lang on Metropolis. In this still from Metropolis showing the 1920s era costumes designed by Wilcom, you can see that the woman in the center has hair buns similar to Leia's. Her mesh fabric top was actually considered for Leia's slave outfit in Return of the Jedi, but it was given to Ulla instead. In a 2002 interview with Time magazine, 25 years after Star Wars was made, Lucas was asked, "Why do the women in your movies have such crazy hairdos?" His response was, "In the 1977 film, I was working very hard to create something different that wasn't fashion. So I went with a kind of southwestern Pancho Villa woman revolutionary look, which is what that is. The buns are basically from turn of the century Mexico. Then it took such hits and became such a thing. In the new trilogy, the same thing applies, to try and do something timeless. I'm just basically having a good time." These southwestern Pancho Villa women, as Lucas calls them, were the soldaderas, or adelitas, women in the military who participated in the conflict of the Mexican Revolution between 1910 and 1920, ranging from commanding officers to combatants to camp followers. Tabea Linhart, author of Fearless Women in the Mexican Revolution and the Spanish Civil War, tells the BBC in a recent interview, "As much as I would like to say that the Princess Leia's hairstyle was based on the soldaderas from the Mexican Revolution, this was probably not the case. As blogger Michael Hyman writes in his post, Princess Hair, he finds nary a bun amongst the lot." And according to Brandon Allinger, the author of Star Wars Costumes, the original trilogy, the buns don't even appear in any of the concept artwork for Leia in the preparation for the film. Hopi maidens wore big hairstyles that are known as squash blossoms or butterfly whorls. This kind of hairstyle was only worn by unmarried women and was created by the mother circling the hair around temporary wooden blocks to create a butterfly look. One famous photograph of a Hopi maiden from Arizona bears some resemblance to the buns, but as Howman points out, Padme wears a hairstyle almost exactly like it in Star Wars Episode II, Attack of the Clones. So, perhaps in the Time interview, Lucas was thinking of Padme, considering that Episode 2 was released in the same year as his interview. My own hypothesis is what happened is more organic. In her last book before her passing, Carrie Fisher puts a humorous spin on the hairstyle with hairstylist Patricia McDermott, saying, The sketches that Pat had been given to use as a guideline were shown to me, so Pat showed me a variety of exotic looks, from Russian princesses to Swedish maids. So image by image we went through hairstyles that would look best when accompanied by clogs, an apron, and puffy white sleeves. A hairstyle probably sported by an Aztec Indian chief's daughter on her wedding day, swirling braids, flowing tresses, and towering wigs. They went to set to show George Lucas and producer Gary Kurtz. Kurtz instantly loved the look, and when Lucas asked Fisher what she thought, she blurted out, "I love it!" hoping that the powers that be wouldn't notice that she hadn't lost the requisite baby fat. On the left is a John Mullo original sketch for Leia's dress worn during the medal ceremony at the end of Star Wars 1977. Note the two cross straps in an X shape over her chest. Mullo's initial design was a dress with transparent sleeves and midriff. However, by adding the X shape, Mullo revised the dress so that only the straps were opaque, while the rest of the dress's upper portion would have been transparent. Mullo's instinct was obviously to make Leia's dress sexier, which ran counter to Lewis's dictates that Leia's personal style be conservative. So in the final film, Leia wore a simple white dress with a semi-transparent cape as seen on the right in a Polaroid shot. This picture would have been used by on-set wardrobe for continuity purposes such as tracking Leia's bracelet placement. While Leia's principal gown was made by Bermans and Nathans in London, Leia's ceremonial gown was created in-house by Mullo's team. John Mullo purposely created a dress that, while beautiful, was not over the top or ornate, saying, "We didn't want anything very regal or complicated or heavily bejeweled or aggressively ethnic, just a smarter version of what she was wearing before." The fabric looks like it's constructed from lightweight silk jersey like these Halston design gowns from 1972. The stunning silver necklace and bracelet worn with this gown were purchased from a London jeweler. This costume was missing in action for many years until it was finally located in a private collection, restored and mended, and brought to Star Wars Celebration 2015 for display. Here is a close-up of Leia's elaborate braided updo. This early 1975 Ralph McQuarrie sketch shows a pirate character who ultimately became the second draft's bearded Han Solo. With his loincloth, bare chest, and nearly naked limbs, this proto-Han Solo could have stepped right out of the pages of Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoom novels. In Ralph McQuarrie's Fantastic Five painting from April 1975, the bearded Han Solo of the second draft is wearing a tight-fitting costume covered in electronic greeblies or detailing. Besides the obvious references to Flash Gordon, especially in the headgear, Han's outfit resembles a cape superhero like that worn by Superman. Even by the time of the third draft, when McQuarrie shaved Han Solo's beard and gave him a less flamboyant outfit, he still considered the idea of putting Han in something fairly revealing. This sketch shows how Han's wearing a transparent shirt over which is a pocketed vest. It's hard to imagine Harrison Ford in this ensemble. Han's transparent shirt appears to be modeled on the transparent cold weather protective suits drawn by Alex Raymond in the Flash Gordon comic strip. Once again, we see McQuarrie turning to vintage Flash Gordon for reference material. A different McQuarrie sketch of Han Solo, originally done for the film's letterhead logo, gave him a dark sweater beneath his vest. The sketch on the far right is a slight variation of the middle image, with a mock turtleneck sweater and modified vest pockets. John Mullo's initial drawing of Han Solo costume drew chiefly on this latter McQuarrie sketch of Han Solo. Here Han is wearing a dark sweater and brown pocketed vest, blue trousers with yellow seam stripes, and brown boots. After getting feedback from Lucas, Mullo produced a revised drawing of Han's costume the very same day. This version features a simplification of the details on Han's vest and trousers. His boots have become black, and at Lucas's request, Han's trouser stripes are now red. Also, Han's shirt is now the white color it would ultimately be in all three films. In the later movies, Han's pants would feature the yellow seam stripes originally envisioned by Mullo for Star Wars 1977. Han's open shirt isn't pure white, but rather an off-white, fitting for his character as someone connected to the human and earthy side of life. I think that his fitted navy pants might be jeans because of the slight stretch we see in action sequences, tucked into tall black leather riding boots. Here is an excellent head-to-toe promotional shot of Harrison Ford in his Han Solo costume. His dark denim pants are decorated with the Carillion blood stripes, a broken stripe running down the side seam. I think that the stripes were silkscreened because I can't see any indication that the stripes are raised like embroidery or ribbon. In this promotional shot, we get a good look at Han's black leather 3-hole punch pants belt and his broken down leather belt and leg holster with a hexagon-shaped metal clasp. You can also make out the pin-tucked pleat in the front of his pants. Han's black cotton canvas vest features a bunch of pockets in the front and back, although they remain mostly empty, reminiscent of a World War II combat vest. Perhaps Malo took inspiration for Han's vest from the U.S. World War II canvas assault vest seen in this image. The vests were issued to assault troops for the Normandy landings and feature multiple pockets in the front and the back. Han wears this look for the entire movie, including the Yavin ceremony, when his clothes would have been presumably been cleaned and pressed, and he wears his collar closed. Here are some early Ralph McQuarrie sketches of Ben Kenobi's Jedi robes. McQuarrie has a penchant for giving his more swashbuckling characters bare arms, as already seen with Han Solo. The sketch on the left has Kenobi wearing a kasota, a Japanese jacket with smaller sleeves than a kimono, and pant-like hakama, a pleated and divided skirt. The top is tucked into the skirt and finished off with a Japanese sash known as an obi, as in Obi Wan. These samurai warriors, seen in a photo taken between 1860 and 1880, wear the haori over the kasota and hakama. The haori is a shorter style kimono jacket that is traditionally worn open. The samurai is wearing an ensemble known as a kamishimo, a style popular during the Edo period. The outer garment with what looks like shoulder pads, which is also seen on a McQuarrie sketch of Ben, is called a kataginu. McQuarrie may already have known that Lucas was pursuing Alec Guinness for the role, since his sketches certainly don't bring to mind Japanese actor Toshiro Mifune. This McQuarrie sketch shows Ben Kenobi with a bald head, a beard, and blue robes. It's likely that this rich-hued outfit was intended for the celebration scene at the end of the film before George Lucas decided to kill off Obi-Wan on the Death Star. The costume incorporates the blue and white collar scheme associated with rebel uniforms in both McQuarrie and Malo's concept drawings. This latter McQuarrie sketch is also clearly influenced by the sakutai, outfits worn by Shinto priests. John Malo originally intended Ben Kenobi's costume in the first part of the film to be the clothes of a Tatooine peasant. Later in the movie, after leaving Tatooine, Ben would change into the uniform of a Jedi Knight. Here is some Malo concept art of Ben Kenobi in the garb of a Tatooine peasant, a practical outfit much like Luke's own costume, and a marked contrast to the long robes Alec Guinness wears on screen. A handwritten note by Malo on this drawing mentions an alternative design based on a kimono, which Lucas wanted as the model for Jedi robes. Ralph McQuarrie's costume design notes also mention putting Ben in a Japanese kimono. In the final film, Ben Kenobi's Tatooine farmer costume was cut for budget reasons, so Obi-Wan always wears his Jedi robes even on Tatooine. As a result, Obi-Wan's Jedi attire has become associated in many viewers' minds with Tatooine clothing. Malo's Tatooine waistcoats are modeled on the Jinbari, like the one seen here, which is a sleeveless vest or surcoat commonly worn with a shirt and pants by Japanese men as an alternative to full-length kimonos. A high-ranking samurai would be wearing a Jinbari like this over his armor, not only for protection against the elements, but also as a highly visible display of his status and his family crest. This 17th century Jinbari, from a display at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, is constructed from silk, felt, metallic thread, wood, and lacquer. Jinbari appear frequently in the Kurosawa movies. Lucas evidently didn't like the Japanese waistcoat idea, because none are seen in the finished film. Even Han Solo's vest is quite Old West in its tailoring. Ben Kenobi ended up with a long kimono-like robes, although his shirt has a Russian-style asymmetrical collar. Ben Kenobi's long Jedi coat, as drawn by Malo, had a flourish that the final film version lacked, a small silver tassel on the point of the hood. A later McQuarrie drawing of Ben Kenobi, which also looks a lot like Uncle Owen, bears a close likeness to the bewigged Alec Guinness as seen on film. The bald Ben Kenobi in McQuarrie's earlier sketches look less like Guinness in costume and more like Guinness in real life without his toupee. Comparing McQuarrie's drawing of Ben Kenobi, the Jedi, with Uncle Owen, the Tatooine farmer, it becomes evident that the distinction between Tatooine settler garb and Jedi robes was much stronger in pre-production designs than in the finished films. Here is what Ben Kenobi's final costume looks like and what would become the standard Jedi apparel. I can't verify, but I suspect that the fabric is a natural fiber like linen or raw silk. Before construction, they most likely washed and shrunk the fabric to give it that lived-in look. Here is Ben's costumes in a photo shoot done exclusively for the book Star Wars Costumes, the original trilogy. Here is a close-up of his leather boots, and you can't tell from any of the images, but under his kimono, Ben wears loose trousers tucked into his knee-high boots. In September 2005, the original cloak was rediscovered hanging on the rails at the London costume shop Angels Costumers. While sitting in the vast stock of rental costumes at Angels, the robe was rented to the general public as a monk's robe, as well as being used for background players in films such as The Mummy. Designer John Molo later confirmed the robe's authentication. Ben Kenobi's turtleneck shirt, though hard to see in this image, is actually a Russian peasant shirt with fastenings down one side of the collar. Ben's brown robe is woolen with the edges of the sleeves, facings, and hood left unfinished to give it that aged appearance. False darns or patches were applied to the kimono to give it an aged look. While shooting the Tatooine scenes while on location in Tunisia, Guinness apparently rolled around in the dust and sand to further distress his costume. In this image, we see the weave of the threads and the natural slubs that come with the natural fibers of Kenobi's kimono. In a close-up of Kenobi's belt, you see that they have added a hook for his lightsaber. Interestingly, the Allies in World War II didn't wear this type of leather belt and buckles, but German SS officers did, from which I suspect Malo derived this idea. This concludes part 1 of the costumes of Star Wars. Be sure to check out part 2, where we'll continue to explore the designs of Darth Vader, Chewbacca, C-3PO, and more. Also, thank you again to Andrew McCarthy, better known online as ATMachine, for collaborating with me on this enormous undertaking. And if you like what you see, please like and share this video, or if you have something to say about this video, please leave a comment below. And like always, thank you for watching.